Okay, so I am absolutely like losing my mind right now over the implications of what I'm learning here as I just started studying trauma and trauma release. And I am just getting into the material. And see, here's the thing for anybody that's interested in manifestation or has been studying it, the missing piece is trauma and the nervous system. And I'm going to tell you why. Because we're all manifesting all the time. This is not about whether or not you're manifesting or learning how to manifest. Not at all. No. What it does come down to is being able to manifest what we want, right? Less of the things that we don't want, because through the lens of studying trauma, we have been able to identify this this observable phenomena, repeatable, observable phenomena called repetition. And what this comes down to is a reenactment of a trauma wound that shows up in our life as you end up having the same type of relationship even when it's with a different person, or these same types of problems that ending up showing up again and again in your work situation or whatever it may be. And as it turns out, right, like a lot of us, you probably know what I'm talking about. You probably have experienced it yourself, or you've seen someone else going through it, and you're like, why do you always end up in these same kinds of relationships? Why? Because unresolved trauma has a process, it has a cycle that it needs to go through. It needs to complete the cycle, because if it doesn't get to the final phase of like discharging the traumatic experience, discharging the chemicals that were released in the body, if we don't get to that part, then it gets stuck. And stuck trauma, that's what we know now, it causes illness. And that's what makes this relevant. So, stuck trauma, it actually has, there's like this own motivation of being able to complete the cycle, right? Like where would you say this comes from? Like deep within the soul, like the greater soul, whatever your language is, there is some great inherent drive for the trauma cycle to complete. So the manifestation of the same nature of trauma pops up again to give you the opportunity to fix it and to actually complete the cycle in a way that results in victory, which gives the signal up to the brain to release the trauma response, essentially. That's a really simplified way of saying it. But I, I, for me, this was, this is sort of basically the epiphany that's I've been completely blown away about, because it turns out that it's other researchers have said that we don't really understand how this is even possible. Like, how does a human being have any influence over the external reality and the happenstance? If you're familiar with what I'm talking about, this pattern, this repetition, this phenomena, um, it can literally be someone's personal hell, being trapped in your worst traumatic experience, not being able to triumph, complete the cycle, and escape it. So it just is on loop. Is there really anything more literal, like, to define hell than that? And so it's not that when we're on repeat like that, or we're manifesting these patterns from a place of trauma, it shouldn't be seen as something shameful. And that's what I really wanted to get on here and make a point about, because I have suddenly been shown the grace in all of this, the grace in those horrible things repeating again in our lives, to give us the opportunity to get it right, to respond in such a way that results in our victory, our safety, our triumph, and then the process completes and we are able to release and discharge the trauma and get on with our life and not be affected by all of these horrible consequences. I mean, if PTSD is not a foreign concept to you, if, we see that it's most famous for war veterans, but PTSD, we know that happens, that can be caused by all natures of trauma. But if you know what I'm speaking about with PTSD, then you understand just the severity of the consequences of not being able to release stored trauma. And what is so interesting is that the reason it has to be such an uncanny pattern is because it's necessary for us. It is absolutely required for discharge of trauma that you complete the same exact type of process that was the original stressor. So it has to be the same nature of the trauma, and it has to be the same heightened, charged experience. So that's why these traumas are so incredibly uncanny and intimate and manifested just for us. And this in light of the recent Nobel Prize winner saying that they've finally been able to prove that, yes, nothing is real. Nothing is real. And so it really is coming down to, you're manifesting all the time. We're manifesting our realities all the time. You know what I'm talking about. It's real shit, dude. This is intimate. And you're the only one in your life that can really understand, when it really starts to get you, these patterns that actually start to, I guess, run rampant, right? For any nature of trauma, like you could have a lot of them. And then just living on repeat year after year, because we have not, up until only just recently, we haven't known how, as a human being, to address the nervous system in such a way. And the thing is that non-human animals, they have a process which is very instinctive to them. After a trauma, after they get out of their like tonic immobility, or like that state, which is the trauma response, which includes editing out the severity of the situation. So if you've ever, upon impact, perhaps you forgot just a few minutes before and a few minutes after, because bless the universe is going to just say, hey, you don't really need to remember that. We're going to give you some nice, natural chemical brain drugs to help you get through it. And it's a beautiful system. But for animals, when they experience that, they're not afraid of that immobility. It occurs naturally for them, and it edits out the trauma, the threat of death. And that if death does occur, then the animal, didn't have to experience a really terrible part about it. But if death does not occur, then the animal gets up, they escape, and they shake it off. And they get on with their lives. And their bio statistics and, their vitals are just fine. But we don't work that way. We humans, with our, conscious awareness of fear and memory and how that influences future, we outsmart that system that was in place that's supposed to help us release. So for us, it's turning out that we need a manual release process. And I say manual, not entirely literally, but I mean, it requires the work, because it doesn't complete on its own in most cases, not in all cases, which is, part of what we're learning and we're studying, and is what is responsible for illuminating this at this point. And so that's what I think is just so wild, is for all of this work that I've been studying to understand manifestation just on all different scientific levels, the laws of the universe and all of it. We are all the time already manifesting. It's already happening. And so really this is the question of learning how to hack the entire really system, the system being your relationship with reality. Because what we are learning, if you have the ability to manifest your own personal hell in the form of the loop of a pattern from your most horrible traumatic experiences, You have the power to manifest anything. Because if you've ever been in one of those loops, you know how uncanny it is and how strange it is that you ever had to experience the original trauma in the first place, but then you ended up in the same exact uncanny. How did that happen? How is that even possible? That's reality. That is the reality that we're living in. That is the world that we're living in. So that's why we have to get the trauma that's stuck in our subconscious mind, in our nervous system, in our body. You got to get rid of those patterns that are on loop, that are keeping you in the same experience. If you don't like what you're getting, then you got to stop what you're doing and do something different. It's just real basic math right there. And so, yeah, now that I'm starting to understand how the trauma piece fits in, and the thing is that so many of us have traumas, and maybe you're someone that's watching this and just like, yeah, no, I mean, that's interesting, Amelia, but I'm not traumatized. I don't have anything like that. Well, what's interesting is that the majority of us do, as a result of childhood experience, because of a little thing called like known awareness, I believe is what one author has referred to it as. But it's the sense of your perceived helplessness. So that when we're a child and we're smaller than the adults and we don't have a lot of control over our circumstances, we're very, very vulnerable to trauma. And it is remarkably and beautifully hidden away back here in the attic, in the closet of the subconscious mind, so that the conscious mind doesn't have to be distracted by that while it's doing its day-to-day. It's really lovely. But without understanding that and then knowing how to go into that file cabinet in the attic and locate that and make change to it, people spend their entire lives being victims of it. And what's furthermore and even more scary is that when you think about how this pattern repeats itself onto like outward in these greater dimensions of like culture. And so if you've got entire generational cultural unresolved trauma that hasn't been able to complete itself, like from war, the entire culture is going to have to raise to that level of trauma in order to complete that particular trauma cycle and find release. So I don't know what you think about that philosophy, but it's just everything is blowing up for me because as a result of that information. So I'm just sitting here in my pajamas and in my study mode, gonna probably brew another pot of mostly decaf with a little caffeine in there, and just go deeper in. But I'm overflowing with this. I can't contain it. It's wild. And so I guess it's just interesting with everything we talk about with manifestation. I'm going to finish this up because it looks like it's coming up on 15 minutes now. But with everything that we're talking about in terms of learn to manifest, you're already doing it. So shift your perspective a little bit. And if you look at your life and you do that thought experiment, start to notice how you have that much power. You really do have that much power over the outcome. And I'm sorry if the trauma lens is like a little bit of a morbid one, but to me, that is absolutely explosive information. So I wonder if that drops a bomb on your life, and if it's blowing up walls and you're able to see now on the other side. That's been my experience ever since I started with this trauma release work. And I myself did the release exercises, and that is what convinced me to make the investment to study this and support other people with this. It's that powerful. That is how I experienced it. So if this is a relevant subject to you, if this is of interest to you, let's talk. Let's talk.